morning and welcome to a very special edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Thursday, July the 14th, 2022. Suicide is a devastating problem among Black youth, and researchers and mental health professionals are desperate to understand why and how best to address it. A recent study found, for instance, that Black children between the ages of 5 and 12 are about twice as likely to die by suicide as white children of the same age. The urgency to deal with the issue has only grown more acute. A study found that suicide rates among Black children and adolescents have recently been worsening. Between 2003 and 2017, suicides rose in this group, especially among Black girls, whose rate of increase was more than twice as high as that of Black boys. Here to break it down is an amazing panel from the Introspective Counseling Services in Florida. It's Sonny, Etienne, also NMPA journalist Dawn Montgomery, and journalist Oshia Boyd, and Houston Defender journalist Assad Walker. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
And Sonny with us. I don't see Sonny. Okay, so here's Sonny. Sonny, so help us to understand how do we help our seemingly helpless Black girls and boys.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you to everyone on the panel. Thank you for having me this morning. How we help our children. And I use the word our very specifically because these are our children and this is our problem. And so if there's going to be any repair, it's going to start with us. So I want to actually take a look at the word repair, and I'm going to break it down into acronyms, and I think that's going to help guide our show today. R, reduce depression. E, establish identity in youth. P, prevent suicide, of course. Alleviate the negative, what I call the 6 A's, and that is when children feel alone, when children are afraid, when children get angry, apathetic, and when they're dealing with anxiety. I, we want to now instill hope in our children. Then we want to restore what I call the 6 A's. And it's what every human being is looking for, but in particular, children. And that is affection, attachment, attention, acceptance, assurance, and actualization.
We lost your volume, Sonny. Okay. Yeah, got you.
I apologize.
So what was that last acronym?
The last acronym is going to be where we're going to restore the 6 A's. It's very critical. Like all human beings, children especially, they're looking for affection, attention, acceptance, appreciation, assurance, and self-actualization, which is the role of adults. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is really geared towards helping adults understand their role and how to deal with this problem that's facing our community.
Fantastic. I want to bring the panel in as well on this discussion, and I want to start with Dawn. So, Dawn, you heard the acronyms. What are your initial thoughts on this? And we can throw it back to Sonny, and he can further break it down for us.
Of course, actually, Sonny is completely correct, in every aspect. I think it's very hard just in our community. If you look at the difference in generations and how different parenting styles have gone on, because now you have this new thing called gentle parenting, that a lot of more Black parents are trying to be more mindful of their tone and how they're talking to their children, how they're disciplining their children. And then a lot of times in these situations of severe depression, as well as suicides that have been actually seen through, I feel like there was some need of like compassion or some need of like someone understanding where they are, instead of just saying, oh, you're just a child, you'll be fine, you'll get over it. I know that, and a lot of times that it's very difficult for our parents to understand where we are because someone either told them to pray it away or it'll go away later on, just kind of like sleep it off or what have you. And in these days and times, we can't just say that. We have to be more more mindful of what our children actually need, what they're looking for, what's in their school environment, what things are they doing in like games, who are their friends, who has access to them, because a lot of times we rarely even know that there is an adult who randomly is having a conversation with our children, especially if they have a presence on the internet. So I do appreciate him breaking that down and what that means. And I would like for the conversation to kind of be centered around talking about those things.
Well, Sonny?
Well, great. Those, for me, I wanted us to all see like what is our personal experience with suicide, not just with teens, but just suicide itself. And I think one way of looking at it, I wanted to kind of do this backward engineering approach with today's discussion, and that is to be face-to-face speaking with the folks from the medical coroner's, the medical examiner's office, when they are trying to unravel how the child lost his or her life, or person for that matter. But then the family is now left with the questions of why did this happen? I think for us to do that, then we have to enter into the mind of the youth of what they're thinking, the questions that they're asking themselves, which start with, why am I here? Why doesn't anyone like me? Why don't I have any friends? They had a lot of whys before they made that that very critical decision. And so I think by us tracing back through this sequence of events, we now can kind of see the tail of the tape, if not start to put the pieces together. And in so doing, now we can move forward as a community, but also as individuals to prevent suicide. So what typically leads to a suicide? Depression. But what is typically the underlying factors of depression? And a lot of it goes back to those very questions that I just stated a few seconds ago. And so the role of parents and loved ones, it's not just parents, but it's loved ones, is trying to get into those questions and help that youth develop the resiliency, as I mentioned earlier, to help them work through the whys. Children lack the tools. For over 5 years, my experience with suicide was working in a psychiatric facility. So right around this time, about 4 years ago, I would be at this hospital, and from the time I clocked in to the time I left, the majority of the patients in there were in there for suicide. There was a division with youth, and so I was constantly talking to kids. I was bombarded with suicide. And these conversations, I learned so much from talking with these young people as to the whys that were in their mind. And so I wanted to open up to the panel as we can together as professionals and within our respective disciplines to start to look at the whys that they've heard and to share, and then we could continue to this discussion together with solutions, viable solutions.
Absolutely, and let's bring in Oshia. Oshia, I know you've obviously covered a lot of things in your reporting. Sonny mentions the whys. Have you been able to come across some whys in your reporting?
Well, at the Recorder, when I was there as editor, we did several stories about suicide in youth. And we learned it was growing and it was increasing in Black children. And there's so many things to unpack here. And Sonny hit and Don hit on several things. Part of the idea is generational. We as Black people think Black people don't commit suicide. We have this idea that it's a white people thing or it's a rich people thing. We don't do that. It's a sin. So pray it away, go to church. We don't often see how those two can connect. You can still be in church and still be depressed. We're now that it's becoming less of a taboo topic in general, we're talking about it more and we're actually being honest. Because I remember kids who committed suicide and there was this whole disbelief of no, they didn't. Something happened, something else happened, they didn't commit suicide. Now we're being honest and really talking about, okay, this was suicide. But it's a pain there because we want to know, how did we fail this child? And it's a denial, it's a denial. And so, but in doing that, we're not facing reality and being able to see and help the next person, the next parent. And sometimes as parents, you can't fix everything. We want to fix our children. We want to, we feel guilt when we can't fix something. Suicide of a child is a definite message, and many times the way suicide happens is a definite message of how much pain that child was in. And if a parent didn't know that, then they're just racked with guilt. So we need to also give space and care and comfort to those parents too. It's a very touchy subject, and I think we're just now beginning to understand how to even talk about it, how to even realize it happens. It's happening to our kids. We need to have this important conversation more than once. We need to talk about this a lot, because our kids, we can't say, well, when I was their age, I was tough, or these kids need to toughen up. You can't say that. You don't know what kids are going through today. It's different. Every generation goes through different things. We didn't have this cell phone in our hands every day, 24/7. People have access to you all the time. I remember my daughter, when she was like in 7th grade, saying some little girl was bullying her on the one of the social media platforms. And I said, block her. And she was like, oh, yeah. It's just that kind of little, kids don't think like that. Kids do not think like, they think I have to put up with this, and I just block her, block any of her friends. She doesn't need to have access to you. Don't talk to this kid in school. It's those kind of things. Parents need to be aware of what's going on social media. Get your social media accounts, follow your children, do those things to see what's happening, because so much is happening. They're doing and they're in their rooms all the time. Now kids have TVs, cell phones.
They got everything at their disposal. Yeah.
When I was growing up, we had to come out in the living room if we wanted to watch TV or do anything. We were together. That's not happening a lot. They're isolated by design now, which makes it even easier for you to miss signs of depression.
Well, Sonny, before I go back to Sonny, Assad, I'm going to ask you the same question. In your reporting, what have you found?
So here in Houston, in a sense, we're blessed to have so many Black psychologists and others that are dealing head on with this issue. Dr. Rita Walker, who is at the University of Houston, Dr. Zina Bell, Dr. Willie Mae Lewis, Dr. Carolyn Clancy Miller, and several others. But one of the things that they all talk about is that our youth are feeling a sense of devaluation, or a lack of self-worth. They don't see themselves as valued. They see themselves attacked and devalued in all institutions, in the media, in the news, TV shows, movies. Hell, the Black church, forever, and some Black churches still, their religious iconography still depicts images of the divine looking like someone else. And so whether you're in church, whether you go to school, whatever institution you're in, you find yourself as Black children being devalued. A lot of people talk about the adultification of Black girls in schools, where a little Black girl will do the same quote unquote infraction as her white counterpart, but she gets disciplined harder. The punishment is longer. So they see this. And then on top of that, we are inundated with these images of seeing Black people assassinated, lynched by police and others every single day. And another thing that we see is those people that do the lynching not being held accountable. So over and over, our youth, hell, our adults too, are bombarded with this message, consciously and subconsciously, that you do not matter. You don't matter. Your pain doesn't matter. Your voice, your pleas for equality, your intelligence, none of that matters. And when you feel like you don't matter, you are in a dangerous place. And I mean, that's why, to take off my my reporter's hat and put on my ministerial hat. Hell, one of the foundational religious messages came out of Kemet, man, woman, know thyself. And you see that same message in all the world's major religions, because it's just that important. You've got to feel good about who you are and know your history and your worth and your value. And when you don't see that, you are setting children up for literally catastrophe.
Well, Sonny, in your practice, I understand you talk about to help enhance hopefulness, I should say, giving effective answers and to increase resiliency and improve self-worth. So how is that done? How do you help to increase the resiliency of these young ones and improve and help them to improve their self-worth? What are the effective answers?
Sure. I think when O'Shea spoke about our kids don't think, immediately that led me to say, I gotta, speak to that. The tools that we provide children with is how to think. There's an old saying, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Well, if I'm going to watch my thoughts, then I got to teach that youth, okay, are you even your thoughts? No, I'm not my thoughts. And I'm also not my emotions. So what am I then? And we start to, there's a case of going into using spirituality, or we just stick with psychotherapy and we just help them realize you are so much more than just your negative thoughts. So adults often have to kind of do the thinking for the youth until that youth pretty much has the resiliency to think for themselves. So it's kind of like we're like this battery. We connect our car battery to their battery, which is our minds to their minds, and helping them develop alternative ways of looking at their situation. Mr. Assad talked about feeling devalued. So the approach that I take with youth in helping them develop that value is to address what I call the 6 A's. And that is, there is still affection out there for you. That's what a child is probably feeling. If I'm not getting affection, if I'm not getting attention or feel attached to anything, then I end up with the negative A's. I feel alone, I feel afraid, I feel anxious, I feel angry. And if I feel alone, and so when O'Shea talked about that our children are in their phones, let's follow that same sequence. They're in their room, on their phone, in their heads, and in their feelings without the tools. And without that tool, that then fosters this hopelessness and helplessness. There's no one to help me. So it's reframing their whole cognition, helping them to rethink or to see it in a whole new life. Oprah calls it the aha moments. A lot of our children, that's what they need, aha moments. And they're probably going to get it from the right people. The great Tupac said, I remember Marvin Gaye used to say to me, he had me feeling like black was the thing to be. So he even had Marvin Gaye, someone to listen to that was giving them a positive message or giving them an alternative approach. As Brother Assad said, it's understanding the history. It's understanding who they are, a sense of value and a sense of meaning. My life does matter. Even if it doesn't matter to certain people, it does matter, which brings it back to the adults. We're the ones that have to value our children and instill to them the meaning of their lives and how their life has purpose.
Yeah, big Orioles fan Michael E. Haney Sr. says the Black church has abandoned the urban communities in Baltimore. Many of the pastors don't live in the community the churches serve, opting to take residence in the suburban community. Michael, your Orioles 9 in a row, I think it is. Danielle Pierre, Sonny, I wanted to lift this to you. She says it's a very timely and good topic. There's a great need for more Black mental health professionals and proactive services assessments. But here's the main point I think Daniela Pierre makes, and I want you to respond to this. She says, too much of mental health is conducted on a reactionary basis.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Pierre. And that's why we started off with seeing ourselves at the medical examiner's office, when we're dealing with the aftermath. So we have to take a preventative approach. And that is, we have to catch it the same way we're trying to catch cancer before it metastasizes. We're trying to be preventative. And that means we have to stay in close communication with our children. Now, there's a caveat to that. Children don't want to talk. Children are on their phones, in their heads, in their feelings, in their rooms.
How do we get around that?
Yeah, that's where I think we got to go back to the things that work. If the record's not broke, there's no need to try. We could improve it, but there are old methods and things that we need to go back to that do work. Discipline, screen time, family time, recreational time. It's restoring even and reframing even how our families are structured and the things that we're doing with our children. A lot of times children are like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to that. I don't want to do this. No, you're going to do this. There's still something called parental authority, and it's for a reason. The child may not understand it or even appreciate it in the present, but they're better off for it in the future. So again, the onus does fall on parents and adults alike. Even for myself as a psychotherapist, I know, yes, I'm a psychotherapist, but to our Black clients, I know I'm so much more. I know I'm a mentor. I know they're looking at me. They see how I dress. Everything that I do, I know impacts how they see themselves. So even how I model myself is important to helping young people engage the things that we would like them to engage in besides just being on their phones. And yeah, it's
well, Sonny, I want you to keep this in mind as I go to Dawn, and you'll see why I go to Dawn on this. Greer is asking, what about the child that shows no sign of distress? Because kids are committing suicide that show no signs. Now, last week on this program, Dawn shared with us something very personal that she had attempted suicide in the past. And you look at Dawn, at least from what we were saying last week, we look at Dawn. Dawn looks like just the happiest person on earth. You would never expect anything like that from her. Dawn, I'll let you take it from there. And then, Sonny, those questions that our great producers are asking, I want you to respond to it. But I want to go to Dawn first, though.
Yeah, I like that Greer brought that up as well, because a lot of times, to piggyback on what Sonny was just mentioning, as a parent, and as someone who was a child who committed suicide as a cry of help, but was also a straight A student, was also in every club, was also a track star, basketball player, all of those things. Like, I was very active, but I was still depressed. There were still issues and things that I was dealing with from my childhood, a lot of trauma that I was unable to kind of process at the time because I didn't have active therapy during that time. I will say that a lot of that is, I think O'Shea said this earlier about generational issues and things of that nature, where I had learned after the suicide attempt that actually a family member and my mom had actually went through some of the same things, hence why they were unable to kind of understand and process what was going on with me. Now, mind you, considering I'm like actively doing all of these things, I'm actively, showing up at school, coming back home and seemingly okay. But at the end of the day, me overperforming and doing these things was a way of me trying to cope. But that created other stress for me. So I will say, just in general, just as a parent, one of the main things that I'm very, very intentional about with my children is them understanding that they will talk to me. I don't know when you're going to talk to me, but you're going to talk to me. It's going to be in some portion of the day, but you will talk to me. I will set up a conference time in the house where if you need everybody's attention, everybody's going to sit in the living room and everybody's going to talk about it. One main thing that I do remember from a generational standpoint is that at one point in time, Black families used to sit at the dinner table all together and eat. We didn't have phones. We didn't have TVs on, a radio on, nothing. To sit at the table and eat and really talk and find out what was going on throughout our days. And really just one intentional thing that I do, whether it's breakfast, whether it's lunch, if they happen to be at home during the day, or whether it's in the evening when we're having dinner, is one of the main questions that I'm asking is not necessarily what they're doing or what they did for the day, or how their day went, because generally they'll give us quick answers, right? But what went wrong during your day? Who said something to you that upsetted you today? And how did you take that? Why do you feel like that was, targeted towards you? I'm asking all the questions. I'm very, very intentional in trying to have these conversations with my children. But another thing that I wanted to bring up in the midst of all of this is that we have to be mindful that these from our generation and younger, a lot of these young people are coming out. And when referencing coming out, and understanding who they are, a lot of times our families aren't understanding to, okay, so you're gay, now what, or you identify as this, now what does that mean? Or more so, it's like, oh, well, you're too young, you'll figure it out later on. Well, no, you actually just need to listen sometimes. And a lot of times listening will also assist them in figuring out what their value is and who they are actually.
If I could piggyback really quick, Stacey, because I wanted to I know you're going to go to Sonny.
No, go ahead. And by the way, everyone, by the way, everyone, it's Oshia. That's
I was going to get there. I was going to get there.
Sorry.
I was going to get there. But what I wanted to, because I was hoping that we got to something like this, because I actually wanted to share when the doctor said, share your experience. I never actually attempted, but I contemplated suicide as a child. And unlike Don's situation, mine was external. It wasn't internal. It was things that were happening to me. I was in abusive. My mother was abusive, and so I had a lot of pain stemming from that situation. And so my idea was, well, then why am I here? Why do I need to be here? I'm the problem. If I'm not here, I won't have to go through this pain. And so that was in 7th, 8th grade. So I identified with some of these children who are having issues. And you wouldn't have known, you would have never known if you saw me, how angry and hurt I was. Because I was a kid who was involved in things. I always laughing, always playing, giggling. But when I got home, that's when I was in pain. And so we have to think about, it's not just internal, it's also external things that are happening to children that are making them think this way. And so I'll just leave it at that and let the doctor take over.
Sonny?
No, you guys are just dropping it. And reading some of the comments in the bottom here. Yeah. I mean, let's just take the recent passing of the model, the one who worked for, I think, Access Hollywood. So that's not the stereotypical look of what suicide we would assume looks like. And so we can go about, like Dawn said, living our lives, trying to stay busy. Like O'Shea mentioned, that you couldn't tell. It wasn't as apparent. But Dawn mentioned earlier about gentle parenting, but the way she described what she's doing with her child is what we call creative parenting. We're thinking outside of the box of how we do things, because the connection is that important. If we go back to what I mentioned, the 5 A's, we ourselves want the same thing: affection, attachment, attention, acceptance. We all want it. So by empathizing with our child, we create a safe environment for that child who is coming out, a safe environment for that child who is questioning their identity. And that safe environment means it's not about me. It's about this child. And so you don't have to be a trained therapist. All you have to be is a human being that has a bleeding heart. That's why I call it Triple H. If I'm humble and humane and hopeful, that's all a child needs. That's all a teenager needs. Is that from an adult. That's the safe space that you create, that the child may not initially explain what's going on. They might even have the words to articulate what they're going through. But if I create the space, the environment, that it is okay, little by little, you'll see this youth dropping pieces. And then at some point, you can now seek out a mental health professional. But it's not, I want to really, really, really emphasize this. It's not just therapy. Therapy, that's the thing. Put them in therapy. Mm-hmm. Youth pastors, coaches, who are their friends and who are the parents of the friends? It's understanding what we look at on their friend circle. Yeah. So sometimes with the young people, when I'll create a friend circle with them, who are your close friends? Who are just your kind of good friends? Who are just your acquaintances? And who are kind of like the stranger dangers? Understanding their world, let them take you in. So I will play Grand Theft Auto with a kid. I'll learn a lot about a kid while we're playing Grand Theft, because it's a safe environment. All of a sudden, he's like, Mr. Son, you don't mind playing this? Nah. We'll listen to a Kodak Black song together. All right. You like Kodak? Not really, but I'm listening to it. My whole point is it's not about me. It's about that kid. That's who it's about. So kind of like Peter Pan, I become a kid to reach that kid. And for parents, it's that. Take off the adult cap and become a youth all over again. And I think the youth will start to open up and give you parcels and little pieces here and there. Someone had asked about is depression hereditary? So the approach that we take is what we call the biopsychosocial, and that is depression, like many other mental health disorders, may have a biological root in which there is what is coined the chemical imbalance. There's social aspect in which the environment that I'm raised in which I've experienced trauma. I've been through some tragic events and what have you. And there's also personally what's going on with me and how I'm developing. I think when I was speaking with Greer yesterday, one of the main things that she and I kept talking about, and it should be stated, is the youth is under construction. They're a work in progress. Their identity is still being formed. One of the theorists is Eric Erickson, who specializes in child development. And one of his theories is that children, not all adults, all humans go through these stages. And the stages, one of the stages that we're looking at when it comes to suicide among our teens is identity versus inferiority. And so you take the fact that we're melanated, you add to that the social political, the social economic issues that some of our children are facing. You add to that some of the schools they attend, and you add to that bullying. You add to that, so that devaluation that Assad mentioned earlier. We're trying to stop that hemorrhaging. That's where the bleeding. Their identity, it's still under construction, and so they don't have a clear idea of who they are. So they might be busy, I say, Adon, engaged in different activities, but they still don't fully know who they are. They're being told who they are by someone else. And it's really impactful when that someone else was telling who they are in a negative light are adults. That's the impact of adults.
And Sonny, as we get into Black identity in America and how it plays into it for teenagers, you use a lot of Tupac. I noticed. I also noticed one of the quotes from Tupac. You say there. He says, "Say there ain't no hope for the youth, and the truth is, it ain't no hope for the future." And then they wonder why we crazy. Talk about that, if you will, and bring it back to Black identity in America.
Most certain. Well, Tupac was very much aware, just being raised as he was raised, as a child of a Black Panther, as far as self-identity and owning his Blackness. Those are quotes taken from the song "Keep Your Head Up," which is why and one of my interventions called "Keep Your Head Up." It's look at the first verse of that song. They say the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, the darker the flesh, the deeper the roots, the root of the pain, the trauma. Tupac was constantly talking about suicide in all of his music, as was his New York counterpart, Biggie Smalls. He has a whole song called "Suicidal Thoughts" on his debut album. And in this song, he's talking about, I'm a piece of crap. I don't even want to go to heaven. I want to go to hell. Because of how he was seeing himself. In the same album, stereotypes of a Black male, misunderstood. So no one understands me. So what am I doing here? What's my purpose here? And so I utilize hip hop as well as soul music because I believe it is our sermons. It is our Bible. It is our Quran. It is, in many ways, what our young people are turning to for answers and for words to give their lives meaning. So going back to there ain't no hope for the future, this kind of paints a picture into Tupac's dismal perspective of the world. It's that bleak. We're talking about he's seen the drive-bys. There was a little girl that was killed at one of his shows. So he's already starting to develop this attitude of like, it's not good. So when he says that, and they wonder why they call us crazy, and then the very next verse, I blame my mother for turning my brother into a crack baby. So our youth, like a Tupac, they're analyzing life, and they're coming up with an assessment. It's not a healthy one. it's one that is one-sided. And so the answer is only one-sided. Suicide must be the only option. Why stick around? There's nothing else. So again, our roles is to provide them, yeah, I see what you're saying, but let's show you another way of looking at it. And then let me show you another way of looking at it. And then I want you to look into yourself. Take a deep look into yourself and think. And that's why my practice is called introspective. I help them to look within themselves and not just see what they're seeing, that there's other ways of looking at it.
Yeah, this is, you're watching this very special edition of Let It Be Known, young people suicide in the Black community. Assad Walker, we'll never get your name right either, Assad, but you had some thoughts on the social attacks on Black folks. I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, but first, I just want to say, we're always saying how we've got to get our children to talk, and I agree. I have 6 children, so I know the struggle. But one of the keys to that is we have to talk, like as adults, and as Black men, historically, traditionally, we hold stuff in, and we want to put up the, I got it all together front. I'm strong. I'm this and that. But we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and share with our children those vulnerabilities and those struggles. I think everyone on the panel has talked about they were struggling in silence almost, right? Where on the surface, everything looked okay, but they had things going on the inside. And I think we've got to model the behavior that we want from our children. If they're going to feel comfortable sharing, these things that aren't so comfortable, we have to do the same thing. And I'm always reminded of this one study that said Black children receive on average 200 negative messages a day. And for any one negative message, a human being has to hear 5 positive messages just to stay balanced. And we know that our children are not receiving 1,000 positive messages a day. So how do we make up that gap? It's got to be one, the doctor said we've got to teach our children how to think and how to respond. One is positive affirmations. If no one else is going to say anything great about you, you've got to say it to yourself when you wake up or when you go to bed. But another is, I guess comparing old school to today, when old school is always focused on, the punishment, what you're doing wrong, we've got to lift up and celebrate, our children for what they do. So we've got to give them way more positive messages. And, since Brother Man wants to wrap the whole Tupac library, let me just add some other words. Most Def, one of my favorite songs is Umi Says. And in that song, he says over and over, Umi says, shine your light on the world, reminding that child that they have a light, that they have meaning, they have value, something to offer the world. And the greatest hip hop group of all time, Public Enemy, in the greatest hip hop song, Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, Chuck D, the hard rhymer, says in that song, and to my rescue, it was the S1W. He's talking about a group, his crew, his homies. You've got to have those folk that got your back, because, oftentimes today, I think there's a level of confusion with our young people when they see Black people being dogged the hell out, because for so long they have been sold this bill of goods that we live in this post-racial society. And so they don't know what to do with a Trayvon Martin or a Tamir Rice or a Sandra Bland or a Rakia Boyd. They don't know how to process that. And oftentimes I'm thinking, and I'm not the doctor, but I'm thinking they're internalizing that personally. Like we lack worth because, we live in a post-racial society. And I think we've got to be more honest with our children about where we are as a people and, all we've overcome.
Hey, Public Enemy is the Rolling Stones of hip hop without question. Oshia, he talked about the internal, you talked about the external. Briefly, again, I want you to respond to what Assad said, Oshia, before we throw it back to Sonny, and of course we're going to hear from Dawn as well. But I want you to respond to that because I know you've already expressed that yours was external, and so you're actually crying out basically and whereas Dawn was more internal, I believe. So you have those two dynamics there. So how did you, in your case, decide? Okay, I need to do it this way when it's just so much chaos there.
I don't want to make it like what I did was the way to go, because I know that people deal with things differently. I never attempted. I just constantly thought about it, and I thought of ways, and I have to laugh at myself because I didn't want to be in more pain. So I was like, well, no, that would hurt. That way would hurt. What would be the fastest way? And I just never had the courage. I just never had the courage to try. I just always kept thinking there's something more for me. There's something better for me. There's something that I'm supposed to do in my life. And so that's what pushed that propelled me forward. And I still think, okay, there's something for me to do. There's something for me. And I think that's just how I move. And I know that everyone doesn't have that same, and I don't want to place blame and say that, someone else didn't do, and I don't want to come off as cocky or arrogant or causing someone else pain. So I'm trying to be careful in the way I say things, but I definitely just thought there's something more for me. And I think I was always a pretty mature kid. And I think that is just, and I thought about who would be hurt if I did this. Like, I thought about other people, that my dad would be hurt because he didn't know what was going on. I didn't live with my dad, I lived in a whole different state. There would be people who would miss me. And so I thought about me, obviously, and how much people love me, and that's what helped me get over it. And I parented my children in a way that I definitely wanted them to know how much they were loved, and I wanted to give them tons of attention and make sure they never, ever, ever, ever thought, did someone love me? Maybe my mom doesn't love me. I probably overdid it because I probably overcompensated for my childhood, but I definitely know I parented, as Don was talking, I thought, geez, that's how I parented, from a way of making sure my kids, and I didn't even put it together, that it definitely was me always making sure that they knew without a shadow of a doubt, because I didn't know.
And Dawn, they say, I'm trying to make a parallel here. People who have an alcohol addiction forever, they may be 10 years sober, but they still consider an alcoholic. They got to continue to watch that they don't slip back into a drink or anything like that. With suicide, and the thought of the attempt, right? Do you still find yourself on guard, having to be on guard, having to be like that alcoholic who can't have that drink? Is there something that you just have to or can't do?
Oh, that's a definite. I was thinking while she was speaking. The first time was around when I was 15, of course. Sophomore, I had just moved to this new school and all of these things, and a lot of my issues came from internal and mostly external, because I was also living in South Mississippi at the time. So I dealt with a lot of racism early on. So that's something from a very introspective perspective, where I can tell my children, I've seen a burning cross in my yard. I know what the Ku Klux Klan rally looks like. I've seen that physically, like in the flesh, like in a tree, and it's like, it's one of those things where I know for me, there were at least 4 or 5 more times of attempts. And the latest one was 2013. I think I was maybe 2 years into my marriage. And at that time, and I will say that for me, I've realized that as I grow and as I get older, that my triggers look different. There are things that I have to my coping mechanisms change. Like, I feel like every time that I get to a point where I know that I can cope with certain issues or things that are happening in my life, especially if it's beyond my control, that literally I have to shift my perspective, or shift how I see it. Because if I don't do that immediately, then it's going to literally take over my entire thought processes and my body. So
Wow.
I will say that it is an ongoing thing. And I look at it as me being more mindful of my overall health and wellness, as well as just being mindful that with therapy, along those lines that you talk about in therapy, it's consistent treatment. It's consistent, I'm looking for these tools to kind of assist myself. And one of the big things for me that I see with me and my children, I'm not saying that my children are perfect. They make their mistakes, and we have our days. But one of the biggest things that I've seen help bridge the gap between the conversations that I have with my children and the conversations that I used to have with my mom and or my grandmother is the fact that I will literally take the time to actively listen to them, like literally allow them to say whatever it is that they want to say. I don't care if it really takes a shot at me and how I'm parenting, or, if they, use a few words here and there that I wouldn't, want to use in front of my parent. But it's really showing up for them and allowing them to see that they can actually trust me, because I can trust myself in understanding where they're coming from and really not trying to take on that identity for them.
Yeah, Sonny, we're running short on time, but we certainly wanted to make sure to give you an opportunity to bring this full circle with a strategy. We talk about the problems, we talk about the actions, but now if you can give us a strategy, a solution, if you will.
I'm going to just reiterate, and unfortunately she left us, but O'Shea gave us the strategy, as did Dawn, as did Pastor Walker, and that is, we talk. I talk for a living. We talk. But Dawn just mentioned we listen. But also, interestingly enough, Dawn pretty much just, I think, gave us the collective strategy. It's what I call in my new upcoming book, Life Sucks, Soul Searching from the Inside Out, what I call the introspective perspective. So Dawn, you kind of beat me to it there, right? The introspective perspective is there are different ways of looking at it. I break it down into 5 categories. Insight, that is an awareness, an intuitive awareness of who I am and the world that I'm in. That is hindsight, being able to look at my life in 2020 and look at my past and learn from my past. That is foresight, to look at the future, unlike Tupac, not with this bleak outlook, but with, as O'Shea put it, I know there's more for me. Back to insight. I'm a child who is a work in progress. I'm still under construction. My brain's not even fully developed yet. There's so much more for me. That's that hope now. That's that foresight. Oversight. What is the big picture? What is this youth's value system? And what are the parents' value systems? What are their beliefs? Because what we believe is what we will think. And then blind sight. That which I know, which I don't even know how I know, I just know it. Most religions just call that faith. I can't see it, but I just know it. There's more for me and there's more to me. Insight, foresight, hindsight, oversight, blind sight. These are the different perspectives that I can take that changes my worldview. And it gives me now a counter view to counteract the negative thought that I thought was my only thought. It's not my only thought. There are multiple other thoughts. And for all the adults and loved ones who are involved in our youth's lives, you're the key. If they're going to feel the 5 A's, it starts with you. If they're going to feel affection, if they're going to feel affirmation, they're going to feel attachment, it starts with you. That's another reason why I know my life matters. I at least matter to you. So, as O'Shea said, I'll stick around for you. And who knows, I might stick around and realize, like Michael Jackson said, life ain't so bad at all. Maybe if I just come off that wall and begin to engage life, I might enjoy life.
Wow. And there's Dr. Sonny Etienne, Inciting Insight. Welcome to Introspective Counseling Services. You can look him up there. Bobby Henry chimes in from the West Side Gazette with we're talking about all these artists. He uses Earth, Wind, and Fire, but he also says this: in a dark place there is light, and sometimes someone else has to turn it on. Find the light. And Sonny Etienne, you have certainly given us some insight today. So has, of course, Dawn Montgomery. We appreciate just how brave you are, Dawn, and
I
and
was just
how,
about to say that, man. We got to
yeah.
celebrate that sister's courage. Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And Assad, we certainly appreciate you. Dr. Sonny, we got to have you back. This is a discussion that certainly we believe in the Black press, and certainly Greer and I both believe that it has to continue to happen, because until there is no more suicide, until there is no more stigma to any type of mental health, we have to have these conversations and let it be known. We will certainly have it here. We thank you so much for joining us. Again, anybody struggling with mental illness, thoughts of suicide, there's a suicide hotline. There's also the National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI.org. Look them up, or any other mental health professionals that you are aware of. Please seek them out. And as Dawn mentioned, talk to your children, talk to your parents, talk to someone, as someone does love you. And we thank you so much again for joining Let It Be Known. We'll see you tomorrow.